Please welcome Eche Kamar, Corporate Vice President and Managing Director of AI Frontiers Lab at Microsoft Research. Hidenori Tanaka, Group Leader at NTT Research's Physics of AI Group and Harvard University. And Steve Olenski, Founder and Managing Partner, the CMO Whisperer Advisory.
Thank you all. Before we get started, I have to share a little anecdote I was telling these guys backstage. I flew in yesterday from Philadelphia, and I realized this morning I forgot one very essential item that AI can never replace. I forgot my belt. So what did I do? Phone cord. Right? You got to do it, right? So until somebody out here can invent something AI can give me a belt, I did what I had to do. Anyway, we appreciate you being here. Okay, so I'm a marketer, right? And I've worked with CMOs all the time and CEOs, and you might be wondering why a marketer's moderating this panel. Well, I hear from CMOs and CEOs all the time. And it's not how does AI work, it's can I trust it? Is it safe? Why is my CEO pushing to deploy this when I don't fully understand it? So we're gonna reverse engineer that today. And I'm going to start with Hide on my far left. You said something in a pre-call we had last week that I really, really found interesting. And you said something about, you said AI is not a cold computer, it's a warm computer. And that really stuck with me. And it's a two-part question. What did you mean by that? And why does it matter for how people in this room and at this conference are actually using it?
Yeah, that's a really important concept, so let me digest. So like in our group at NTT Research and Harvard, we have been pitching this idea about physics of intelligence, physics of AI, but then the question is like, why do we need to study how the AI works because it's human-made? And in the long history of computer science, the way we have been building computer and even AI, mostly the approach has been logical computer, right? You say, if someone says something to computer, then computer do something. These are all like logical gates. But over the last decades, what happened with the emergence of these artificial neural network, which is the approach to mimic how our brain works on the digital computer. Our parents didn't write a program to program my brain, right? I was just born somehow. I have a lot of cells in a head. And then these neurons talk to each other and then make important decisions. And when I said warm computer, that's really the key, because every decision made by AI, everything, even what the language model says, are not the outcome of thought processes with language. It's the outcome of thought process of neural network. And I don't want to anthropomorphize too much, but then if we are human, then we get tired, and then we make wrong decisions sometimes just because we are tired. It's not the direct analogy, but if you talk with with AI for a long time, there's a long context there. And then we simply don't know how these things affect the decision making for AI, right? So that's why we need to care about before deploying it to crucial, consequential decision making.
Is there a downside to not looking at it that way, in your opinion?
I think so, in the sense that if we are building computer by logic, of course, the set of things that computer can do gets really limited, restricted, right? That's why we need a different approach. But then we know by almost like from theoretical angle, what are the possible outcomes, possible ways computer might be making the decision. But then building trust in AI is not so much of a theoretical understanding. It's really about just like, can I trust you? We're going to have a 40 minutes conversation from here, but how do I know I can trust you, right? And then the method is really just different, and that's the way I think about AI's trust is also kind of similar to how we get to trust human as opposed to conventional logical computer.
Right, and by the way, for the record, you can trust me. Just
thank you.
So it's out there. So I appreciate that. Eche, okay, you spent 20 years in research, and then ChatGPT-4 happens, and suddenly everything changes, understatement. Now you said the horizons collapsed.
Yes.
First question is, what actually shifted? What did you mean by that, collapsed?
Just for some context, I did my PhD almost 20 years ago, hard to believe, on a topic that nobody cared at the time, which was AI agents and how AI agents worked with people. I'm saying this to say that many of the topics we are talking about today in this room, machine learning, AI agents, how they collaborate with people, even the shortcomings that we are talking about, they are not new to the scientific field. In fact, many of the systems we are seeing in the world today, like agents that are programming with us or programming for us or their use in healthcare, these are topics that people have worked on for decades and decades. The thing is, though, we finally have something, which is these foundation models, that have this more general reasoning capability that can apply from one problem to the other. And that is giving us a new computing stack to be able to build many things we dreamed of for decades and decades. So coming to your question, as a researcher, I think we all hope that we have a good understanding of the field. We understand what is likely to work and what is not likely to work. And around 2018, we start hearing about these scaling laws, that if we throw in more data and more compute to these statistical machines, somehow we are going to be getting more capabilities. Being honest, my first reaction to this, Steve, was saying, this is not going to work. There is, in fact, no theoretical understanding of why by just putting more data and more compute to these machines, the machines should have more and more capabilities in them. I was completely wrong. And in fact, by being at Microsoft and the OpenAI partnership, I remember a summer day in 2022, I got a phone call that there is this really interesting model that we should be taking a look at. And that model was an early version of GPT-4, even before there was a ChatGPT in the world. And of course, as a researcher, you go through the 6 stages of grief, because it's like, oh my God, what does this mean? It is kind of the not accepting it. This cannot be true. This cannot be working this well. And then at some point, you get to the acceptance that, yes, the world has changed. My field has changed. And it is very likely that AI research has changed. So that was kind of the reaction back then. In fact, some of us have written a paper called Sparks of AGI back in the day, and then there's even a This American Life episode about how we wrote about that paper, which is a completely different topic. But coming to the question, the moment you see this model for the first time, you realize that there's just so much you can build with it. There's a whole, again, as I said earlier, there is a whole computing stack that is going to be built now that's going to be different than the traditional way we have programmed things. And we are going to be able to train things for other domains. The adaptability of it is going to be really large. And that started all of the work that is happening right now. And I think we were calling it a phase transition. It turned out to be a phase transition for technology, but also for the society as well. But one of the things that has been happening, which is affecting me as a researcher, is the topic that these time horizons have collapsed. What I mean by that is, again, before that moment of seeing GPT-4 for the first time, I was a researcher for more than a decade. And the way we talked about our research and our research investments back in the day was that we are going to be sitting in our ivory tower as researchers and thinking about new problems and create something out of it and write a paper and then move on to the next problem, while product groups and people who are building these things for real would work on the near term, the Horizon 1, and if you're an applied science team, you would work on Horizon 2, and we would stay in this Horizon 3, where you would work on the future-looking things that one day, maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, somebody would care about reading your paper and try your idea. The horizons have collapsed. Every relevant research problem that people should be working on right now are a reality in the systems we are seeing. When you see AI is not working, or its memory is not perfect, or it's hallucinating, or there is a safety problem with it, these are all open research problems that nobody has an answer for it yet. And the moment you work on a solution, that becomes directly applicable to the products that are in the world.
Yeah.
And that's why the horizons have collapsed.
Let me pivot from there. Thank you for that. Now, if you take both of those ideas together, AI behaving more dynamically and research happening in real time with deployment, it raises a really big question. And Eche, I want to start with you. You said that with every jump in capability, we also got to jump in risk. What does that risk look like today?
So in the previous session, there was a discussion about responsible AI. Responsible AI is a topic I worked on during the first part of my career. What is responsible AI about? This is where I disagree with Hadi. I don't think about AI, not working perfectly as like a human thing that we don't understand. This is an engineering problem that we can actually address. And this is why over the time we have developed models, responsible AI practices, risk assessment tools to be able to understand the risks of AI. And when I started the field and started working on responsible AI and deep learning was coming up, the risks we were talking about were I have an image classification system. The image classification system may misclassify somebody's gender or age or race. These were important problems because it mattered for the biases we had in these systems. But then generative AI happened. Mm-hmm. With generative AI, our interaction with these systems have fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
Now we started having conversations with these systems. Then the risk became so much richer. They could hallucinate, give us incorrect information. They could be used for miscommunication or misinformation. Again, with the change in capabilities, we got a whole new set of scenarios, and with that, we got new risks.
Yeah.
Now, we are all talking about AI agents. What are AI agents? AI agents are not systems that we can just talk to. They do things for us. They take actions in the world. They can call tools in the world. They can write code. And with that, there is a whole new risk surface that we should be thinking about.
Oh, exactly right. Hide, from your perspective, is that risk, is it just technology or is it the relationship between humans and AI?
Yeah, so of course there are different kind of risks, but a particular kind of risk that I've been thinking over the last 1 year is something that's really related to the use case of AI in a psychiatric mental health setup, which I think is a really unique kind of risk, right? Because new technology appearing, whether it's a smartphone or Google Map and the human changing behaviors, this has been happening repeatedly. Like we drive a car, nothing existed, but now it all exists and we adopt it. But one thing that is really new about AI is that the way people relate with the technology, for some people, it really overlaps with the way people relate with other humans. Right? What I mean by that is when I work together with a psychiatrist in Japan doing some survey of how mental health patients are using these AI technologies, they are using it for emotional support, digesting their feelings and getting feedbacks, etc. And here, the key is that thinking about AI safety, AI trustworthiness is not just about the study of AI itself. We should really think about the co-evolution of how human psychology adapts to this new particular kind of agent that emerged in this, short horizon of just a couple of years. So I think my statement here is that for particular kind of risks, like mental health, we should be studying human side as much as AI side.
Yeah.
And then the fundamental unit is a relationship between them because there's always a situation, say, oh, there's a person that someone dislikes or something, but then that doesn't mean that the person is, they also have friends, right? So
yeah.
all these are just relational, depending on the situation, depending on the particular pairing with the personality, etc. We just need to think about safety, trustworthiness as a part of bigger system.
Yeah, I'm a big pop culture guy. So when I think about AI and I think about the line, I forget what Spider-Man movie it was in, but you guys will know the line, with great power comes great responsibility. Right? And I'm sure we're all familiar with that line, but I don't think it's been more important and prevalent and just so right now more than any time in history. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but that's a lot of responsibility, right? And a lot of power. What do you say to someone and goes, because you're on the front lines now, right? About you have that power, you have that responsibility. If you're speaking to someone, just a man on the street, how do you kind of allay their fears, if you will?
the answer here is making those fears go away. I think it is taking it as a responsibility, as you're saying, Steve. Because I think at this point, I don't know if there is anybody doubting that AI is going to be changing the way we work, the way we live, our society at its core. So now we have to really recognize the change that this technology is bringing to the world and really discuss how we are going to be working with AI to make it work for everybody in the world and work in the right way, and take this as a responsibility. The reason that I said all of these shortcomings of AI are actually technical problems, socio-technical problems, is because it is not like we are building something that we have no way of controlling or no way of understanding. It is that understanding that when it comes to any technology, and particularly something as transformational and general as AI, it is a responsibility for the research community and for the builders of this technology to ask questions about what can go wrong, who can use it for doing harm in the world, and what are we building around these systems to have the right controls, and taking that as a core responsibility. But there is another side to this responsibility as the users and consumers of this technology. Again, being critical to the technology that we are using, demanding from the companies that are building this technology that we want to understand it more. We want to understand how our usage of this technology is creating power in this world and changing the way we make decisions, and again, being very critical about how we are using the technology.
Exactly. Hide, you've talked about in the past about the idea of co-evolution, right? That we're not just using AI, we're literally evolving alongside it. What does that actually mean in practice?
I think some people who are already starting to use AI heavily already know this in a way, in the sense that, let's say, even at workplaces, there has been a lot of pressure for people to adopt this new AI technology. But then one thing that's really unique in this situation is that, like, first of all, you have to invent how to use it, right? Let's say I'm using AI as a part of research, right? But then of course, none of these AI systems are perfect, whether it's a coding or mathematics. It makes me really move fast, but then I also need to calibrate, all the kind of different errors that this technology might be having, right? And then, there has been this almost evolution of just co-working flow over the last couple of years. And then I think another key thing is that what this AI is also changes, right? The particular workflow that people invented a year ago is not applicable right now, right? So even there's this question of, okay, we need to figure out how we work with AI, how we live with AI. But then what AI is, the definition, what we have, is also evolving in a really rapid time scale. And I think we are, like many of us are in this situation, we are all sensing and trying to figure out this, how to co-evolve in a really rapid time scale.
Eche, along those lines, what happens when people finally catch up to one version of AI just as the next version changes everything?
I think it is confusing for all of us. And I think from research to product to the consumers of this technology, everybody is grappling with how fast things are evolving. Because it is not only that AI is changing the technology we are using, but as we heard in the morning and many of us are experiencing, AI is also creating the next version of the technology and the adaptation as well. And this, I think the speed is just mind-blowing, and it's getting faster and faster. So one of the things, I think we are all trying to find mental models of thinking about this change. The way I've been thinking about this is more around if AI is a general purpose technology, what can we learn about the past in terms of the general purpose technologies change in the society, and learn from that in terms of this impact? So people find different analogies. The one I use is the steam engine to electricity. Some people use it from typewriters to personal computers. But one fact is that if you're trying to use AI, it's just appended to the way that we've been always working, you don't get the true transformational value from AI. We have to think and transform everything around AI. So we have to transform our organizations. We have to transform the way we work. We have to transform the tools that were built for a different era, for this. And this is why I think coding, I always find the coding domain as a canary in a coal mine with respect to AI. Like you look into coding and you get a lot of patterns about like how AI is going to be coming to many different domains in the world. So look at coding. It started with tap, 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 predict what the coder is going to do next. And now coding is being recreated around AI agents. We are going to be seeing this across industries and across the organizations that we have in our companies.
Okay, I want to touch on something. I hear this every day on my podcast and when I interview leaders, when I talk to leaders. This is great, but we don't have time. There's pressure to move right now. So I want both of you guys to answer this, and I'll start with you, Ajay. What would you say to someone? How do you balance that urgency with the reality that getting safety and trust in AI is not something that happens overnight?
No.
So what would you say to a leader? I need this right away, but on the other hand, you got to make sure everything's right. But we don't have time. See that balance.
It is hard. I'm managing a research organization, and it is hard because by the time we are working on something, the floor is slipping from our feet. You know? But I'll tell you the 3 things I've been telling my team, and I think that is generally applicable. One, we have to be embedded in the technology. We cannot apply it for the things we care about or make predictions about where it's going to go next unless we are fully embedded in the state of the technology. And second, we have to recognize that the current state of the technology is temporary. Both the failures and how we use it is just for this moment. It's going to change again. We have seen this even since December. Things have been changing really fast. And again, being embedded in the current state of the technology is necessary to be able to predict where it's going to go next. Second, we have to understand that no model is going to be perfect. No model is magic. We have to do the work of translating these technologies to the domains that we work on and we really care about. And the third is something you and I talked about, which is the production function. The way we are producing technology is changing, and the way we are organizing teams around this need to change as well. And one of the things that is very important is having research, people who have the ability to be able to innovate, solve problems, and think about what comes next, to be embedded very close to the teams that are building the current technology so that we can work on both where things are going, the current state of the technology, and the risks together.
Exactly. Hide, to build on what Ajay was just saying, the question I asked, but a follow-up is, can trust in AI ever be engineered? Or is that just too hyperbolic or too far-fetched? And does it really come down to how people interact with it?
I think it's just time scale is really fast, but then looking back, right? For example, there was an era where people were so seeing hallucinations everywhere. But then if I talk to the latest models, like high-end models, the rate of hallucination has gone down quite significantly, right? So but of course, like hallucination is almost like a first step to trust matter, and then the trust also has like different levels again for mental health and or is cybersecurity, and the ladder is climbing up. But before criticizing or anything, I want to also acknowledge the fact that we have seen trust built for layers that we have already passed, but then it's just that the new doors are, almost like a magic box keeps opening every couple months, right? So by the time we feel like, okay, now we can trust about AI with this part, then there's an entire new magic box opening up, and then, oh wow, there's next level cybersecurity risk. So I think it's just that everything is just moving so fast. But then fundamentally, if we take enough time and care as a collective, it's a technological problem that we can get to the trust.
Yeah, and the juxtaposition that I'm going to go back to is, again, what I hear from CEOs and from CMOs who are getting pressure from their CEOs, like, you told me this was great, now you're telling me to wait because you're not sure, and to try to explain to a CEO, but what we just used 3 months ago has completely changed. And now we need to test it again.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a very common problem, especially in the marketing world. If this was a group of CEOs, how do you get CEOs to understand that, okay, what your CMO or CFO or CIO did 3 months ago was great, but that was then, this is now.
It is hard work. I think everybody needs to understand that this transformation is going to take work. And it's not going to be overnight. And the technology will keep moving. So again, I think what we are coming to is that, yes, these are technology problems, but the solutions for them will also become human problems and organizational problems and culture problems. So as research is going to be moving into addressing the technology side, then each CMO, COO, CEO needs to figure out how they are going to be addressing the human, the organizational culture side of it.
Yep.
Because again, this is not going to be something that any organization or any company is going to be able to solve in the next 3 months. It's going to be an ongoing change. So what are the permanent fixes or the changes or the organizations we can create right now? Who are the people you need for that transformation so that you can do this continuously for your teams?
Yeah, because you talked about, again, on an earlier chat we had about new power structures, right, that AI is shaping, right? Well, then that question becomes, okay, who's controlling this? How are decisions getting made? What do people see? What do they believe? And is it a case-by-case, company-by-company basis? Is it that granular?
As I said before, for researchers, it is very important that we try to predict what comes next, because it is very late to arrive there and start asking the questions about what can go wrong. We need time to be able to work on these really hard problems. So a lot of what we've been trying to do in my group is trying to make predictions about the future. So for example, while everybody was working on chatbots, we said the future is going to be agents. Let's start working on the agents. We started doing this almost 3 years ago. So one topic that we've been thinking a lot is, okay, right now, a lot of the applications we are talking about, it is one agent working with one person. Do we think it's going to stay this way? Do we think the whole world is going to be people talking to one agent?
No, sorry. I thought you were looking for a
I think that was an easy question. But the way we imagine things are going to evolve is getting to teams, ecosystems, and groups of these agents. And we need to start asking questions about that future. When it comes to the enterprise context, this is about reorganizing our teams with these agents, right? But then you get to the consumer, you start thinking about these agent ecosystems. I'm going to have an agent that will know me really well, will have the memory, will do the personalization, and when I need to buy something, purchase a ticket, buy services, this agent will go to the world and work with other agents who might be the agents of these suppliers to be able to get me the things I really want. This is going to create an ecosystem. We need to start thinking about what this ecosystem is going to look like, and then your comment about the power. If the agent is going to be making decisions on my behalf, the agent is going to decide what I see, what options do I get to choose from, and then which suppliers I'm going to be working with or which advertisements I'm going to be seeing. Who controls my decisions? And do I understand the effect of that on my life? I think those are some of the hard questions that we are coming to right now.
Yeah, Hide, this is a great question as we lead into Q&A. This could be very long, but you said something about every person interacting with AI today is part of a large-scale experiment. That's very grandiose. And my question is, I think for everybody that's thinking is, are we moving faster than we actually understand the consequences?
Yeah, so maybe to first pick up on repeat the first part. So a lot of the question about, okay, especially AI in relationship to human, right? If we take the example, let's say medicine, where there are new drugs coming out, people usually do years or even decades of testing of if someone takes a drug, what's going to happen to the body. And because taking some, let's say, drug in psychiatry, medication in psychiatry might change the behavior of the person, right? But I think with the social network and now with AI, it's happening even stronger. So we've noticed, or even ourselves, it's a really new big part of our life, this new technology AI, and then our behavior or daily life. Some people might just talk to AI for hours, and that's the thing that never existed before, right? And all of these things are experiments happening right now. Every time new model comes, we see how people react, how people are using the model, and then that finally gives some idea of, okay, it was an implication of the new generation model that came out, right?
Right.
So in that sense, we are in a really this part of a big social experiment that's happening right now. And if the question is it really fast? And then if doing things slower going to give us more time to reach the level of the trust that we fundamentally think is desired? I think the answer is yes. I mean, if things are slower, of course, we can take more time to create this feedback loop of what people are feeling, what we see in society, what's happening with this new technology, but then that goes back to this design of the next generation, right? Right now, by the time the feedback comes to the AI model that was shipped, which can take at least a couple months or even years, but then there's already next generation of new model coming out.
Coming right behind. Yeah. Okay, I want to leave some time for Q&A. I think this topic lends itself to a lot of questions. So anybody who has a question, who's got the roving microphones, please?
Thanks. My name is Mark. I'm from the Luxembourg Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs. I thought I was going to be very alone here, but I'm very excited, first of all, for the organizers to bring this topic to the field, even though we're always perceived like the Americans innovate and we regulate. I think it's really interesting panel. You're touching on a lot of those words, trustworthy, safe, ethics, responsibility, even though I think in Europe we use more one than the other. And I would layer on that also on sovereign AI or data sovereignty. I mean, the first question would be to Ms. Kamar. If you listen to Yann Lequin or IFFA, who basically are saying, if you want some sentient or conscious AI, we would like to move more towards world models, and you being in the forefront of industry, when it comes to, as you're saying, building, embedding human-centered AI with the human in the loop, where do you see this maybe fascinating research going, being especially here in the Valley? And when the moderator was saying, well, safe is great, but we don't have time, Bengio and Stuart Russell, they are not Luddites. I don't think they're technophobes. They're very much innovators when they're saying we need guardrails, meaning we've been building the plane, we're flying in the plane, and we're writing the safety manual and maybe the landing gear if we need it as we fly. And they came out with the AI safety report, which is really great also for the industry. Where do you see this going? I mean, coming from the States also in the forefront of innovation, when CEOs or I would say individuals, companies, civil society, nations, we all are looking also for AI to be a force of good. And we're also looking to the States to be also on the forefront of that. When I say the States, I have to be neutral, not just the government, I'd say the industry, the States within the States. And especially there's a lot of, I think, red lights coming from Silicon Valley, Bengio and Stuart Russell and Hinton. And so, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we know that the foundation of all of the models we are using today is based on a technique called next token prediction. So the models mainly read a lot of data and then train themselves with this predictive power of being able to predict what comes next. Of course, there is a lot of other techniques that is added on top of this, like reinforcement learning from human feedback, now the core reinforcement learning of learning from the environment, which is adding new capabilities to these systems, making them agentic, because now in part of the learning, the models are able to interact with the world, try things in it, learn from that feedback. But, excuse me. But the one thing these models lack is the meta-reasoning capability. Thank you.
You're welcome. Talk amongst yourselves a second, again.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The capability of being able to say, what happens when I do this? And be able to reflect on that before taking an action. So when Fei is talking about world models, she's talking about models that are able to predict consequences of what they do. So in the technical terms, we are talking about teaching models the capability of predicting when I'm in this state and I take this action, where it is going to take me. And when you have these world models, which are the simulators of the world, before you take an action, you can ask the questions of what if. And they are very powerful to be able to prevent some of the bad consequences, but also add new training functionalities to make the models a lot more aware of their environments and a lot more robust. We are in early days to see how the work on world models, being able to predict these consequences, are going to be embedded into the current model stack. It's a harder problem. That means it needs more work to be able to make the models of this current size to be applicable to that world model thinking. But it is definitely a very exciting area that my team is also working on. Again, as a field, we need to be taking risks. We need to be thinking about new approaches, but also testing them at scale so that we can understand what approaches will give us not only more capability, but also more safety and control. With respect to your question about regulation, regulation is hard. Not because people don't want to try it, but because, again, we are all talking about the time scale here, right? Even as researchers, we are really struggling to understand all of the changes and be able to adapt to it. Now think about bringing multi-diverse stakeholders. People that are working on the policy, people are working on the education, and all of the parts of it to be able to work together. So again, I think it becomes a human problem of who are the stakeholders that need to be in the room. How do we create the right incentives for those people to work together and be able to not only work on pushing the capabilities forward, but also be able to build it the way the society will need it? And I think it's an organizational problem.
Exactly. Okay. Next question. Somebody else had their hand up. I saw it. Front row? Back row? Do we have a microphone? Here she comes. Right here.
Hi, I'm Shailene. So I'm just curious on your take on interpretable LLMs. It was like a huge topic at NERPS. One of the keynote speakers spoke on this. Several of them did, actually. So a lot's evolved since then. But I'm curious, is your team working on that right now? Is that something that you're actively researching? I'm just super curious from a research point of view.
Hade, I think you wrote one of the first papers on that, right?
Actually, yeah. So our research group started 6-7 years ago now, and we've been actually one of the first set of groups who has been just focusing on interpretability. The idea of taking AI model and then looking at the inside of how artificial neuron in these AI models are blinking, and then instead of just talking to the model, we can look at the internal of the AI's brain and then make sense of what these AI might be thinking. And that has been developing really fast, and then right now, one of the reasons why we again care about it is that, again, AI is like a warm being. So we can, for example, 2 years ago, we wrote a paper on extracting emotional state from AI, and then how AI model represent these concepts of emotions. And then we have discovered that psychologists has been postulating almost like a map of 130 emotion words. How these different, some of them are really granular, some of them are really happy, sad, etc., and how they organize. And then we were able to extract really analogous tree structure of emotion from AI models. And now we are trying to, and then I think a week or two ago, Anthropic had a post about how these emotion concepts are actually useful in monitoring model behavior. Are they in some a stress state, and then when the model has this stress emotion vector inside, their decision changing. And this is just one example, but I think it's becoming more and more crucial as AI starts to make consequential decisions. Yeah.
Next, I think we had in the back.
So, Michael from Entity Data in Luxembourg. Beside the fact that we try to make the models more robust, would like to have your thoughts about the analogy between humans and models or agents, because humans will never be perfect. So depending on, I mean, we are biased, and everything that we decide is based on our culture around us. So what potentially is right on one part of the planet is wrong on the other part of the planet. There is religion, there are totally different things on this one. So what are we doing as humans? If you want to run an airport, for instance, you build a set of rules which have nothing to do with like emotions or something like that to control actually our acting and behaving. Is that part of the solution? I mean, it's not the only solution, but is that something that could potentially contribute to it? See?
Yeah. So yeah, so that's one of the, the first thing that I say is that this particular intersection of like a moral ethics and AI has become really important right now. And then one kind of thought that I've been having is that even what ethical means, right? It really depends on the culture. And coming from Japan, it's been really interesting and refreshing how, let's say, in United States, Europe, there's a culture of writing down ethical principle in words, right? But then in the practice of Buddhism, for example, these people never use words. These are more like a state of the body. And I'm not going to be able to comment too much on what is the exact solution going to be. So I think the current paradigm of AI alignment is, each of the AI have these principle, almost constitution that they kind of break, and then hoping that these collective of these AI agents are responsible as a collective. But one thing that I would just say here is that even that working is a hypothesis rather than nothing guaranteed. That's just one approach to ethics. And then I think now is a right moment where people coming from different religious background, cultural background, all discuss what it means to be ethical and then give feedback to the AI community so that we can think about it in a computational way. Yeah.
If I can add to that.
Sure.
If we are doing like a compare and contrast between humans and machines, the one plus of the machines is that we can open up and understand the failures of machines much more transparently than the humans. It's very hard to understand all the ways that a human may have shortcomings in their cognitive function. But the downside is that as humans, we have a lot of diversity. All of us have different shortcomings and strengths, and we have different belief structures, and we have different values, and that actually what makes our society really rich. Whereas the issue with the current way technology is built is that there are always some value judgments that are encoded in these systems, whether we realize or not. This may come from the data, this may come from the way these systems are programmed, or the constitutional AI that is developed around these systems. And one of the problems we need to be thinking about is, especially if all of us are using very few sources of AI, where is that diversity? Yeah. Where is that diversity in values, diversity in thinking, diversity in our beliefs, and what we care about is going to come from? I think this relates to the previous question about sovereign AI a little bit. Like, again, we need to find ways of diversifying the AI and making it work for us instead of somebody coding it for us on our behalf. And I think these are some of the demands that we need to have in the AI that we are using.
We have time for one more in the back.
Hi. If AI has emotions, would the responses differ based on how we ask questions? For example, if we say please versus a curt, rude question, and does the way we ask a question create bias and hence an ethics problem?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. Of course, when I say AI has emotion, this is more like they don't have any body, they don't have heart rate, etc. So the analogy is more like a practical analogy, which is to say, as you said, depending on how you ask, depending on your history of conversation, there is a different AI's neuron activation. The AI is in a just different state. And depending on the state of AI, the answer will be different. So the short answer is yes, and I think that's a really important bias that we have to think about, because even almost a particular intonation, some particular language from different religion might just change the outcome, which is not desired. Yeah.
Chris is saying.
We have one. Yep. One more. Where are we at?
On this side.
Oh.
So we talked about coevolution and the change in the humans using the AI. Are you aware of any research that's studying the human changes by using the different AI, so we can collect some information on diversity? You think of the Framingham Heart Study. You think of the healthy aging studies that have occurred for decades. If we take a cohort of individuals now and study them and their use of AI over a 5-year, 10-year period, we might learn some answers to some of the questions they're talking about. Are you aware of any research?
Yeah, so I'm not so aware of a really in-depth research, because actually experimenting with people is hard, and it's been only just a couple of years. But then a couple of things I can say is that first, I've been using my own body to do a lot of experiments of how I change as I, if I talk there for 10 hours, I just like that kind of thing. So as an AI researcher, I'm putting myself to the front trial of safety and then trying a lot of different stuff. But then when it comes to more collective level observation that I have, for example, is that, again, I think this cultural contrast even between the States and Japan is interesting, because Japan is a country of a Buddhism, Shinto, where we believe that matter and our biological being don't have as much boundary between them. So that's why there was anime, game, and it seems like for a lot of Japanese people, it's so natural, much more natural for them to talk about, all the therapeutic use cases. Yep. People accepted anime well before AI, right? And then instead of looking at the human actor, you look at anime character and then you cry about it. Mm-hmm. So, and then the way humans see the technology, the cultural difference between Asian or Japan and States really changes the way people are using it. And then again, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but we see a lot of difference in the particular area of mental health. Yeah.
Clearly, this is a topic, trust. And you want to have the final word?
No, I just want to add one more thing to the question.
Sure, go ahead.
There has been a really good study from Anthropic recently looking into the software developers that are using their tools and how their behaviors are changing. This research is also related to the decades-old research that was done when autopilots were introduced into pilots, and how they were not able to remember things, or there were some loss of abilities when they depended too much on agents. It is very likely that we are going to be seeing some similar patterns as these agents enter the digital work. And I believe the Anthropic report was really good and detailed way of applying those kind of studies into this new world.
Well, our time is up. Thank you all for coming, and a big round of applause, please, for our panelists.